Versus is a flawed mess of a game mode.
You son of a bitch!
No.
I'm not trying to convince you of anything here. If you like Versus, that is
Perfectly fine.
I can accept the fact that Versus is objectively a great game mode, and hell, I have fun with it sometimes too. In fact, I have fun with a lot of things I don't like, but that's not the point. Versus has so many flaws and shortcomings that prevent me from enjoying it completely. Starting with my biggest issue, the hit detection and hitboxes. They don't work, at least from my experience. I lost count of the amount of times I charged right through a survivor.
Let's count now.
What? I went through coach without a doubt.
Or rubbed off a survivor's back. I know I'm not the only one who has this happen.
What the fuck?
But it's not just the charger, it's every special infected. They all have at least one issue with their hit detection or hitbox. The hunter feels like you're rubbing off the survivors as if they're made of butter. Same problem with the jockey, but it only happens if you try to pounce on them from behind. The smoker's tongue hitbox is very unreliable. It breaks randomly, and sometimes it doesn't break randomly, just unpredictable. The spit the spitter drops when she dies has a way bigger hitbox than it looks. Sometimes it's kind of absurd how big that spit is. What? The boomer's puking animation is a lie. It goes way farther than it looks, and if you look up while puking, it goes even farther. So this animation is just false. And finally, the tank's punch can miss even though it clearly looks like you hit your target. That is at least one hit detection or hitbox issue for the infected. Now for the survivors. Your melee weapon can miss very easily. We have a video on this already. A charger can grab you even though you were nowhere near him. Same thing with the hunter and jockey. The boomer's puke can still hit you even if you are nowhere near it. Seriously, after over 3,000 hours of playing Left 4 Dead 2, I still find myself asking. Your shove can also miss the infected, which is annoying. I already talked about the spit hitting you even though you're not near it. And finally, the tank can hit you even though, you guessed it, you are nowhere near him. Do you see a pattern here? These hit detection and hitbox issues go both ways, and it makes playing Versus frustrating as hell. Whenever you aim at your target and attack, the attack should work. But in Left 4 Dead 2, something always seems to go wrong. So why is this the case? I'll tell you why. It's because the game is lying to you.
You lied to me.
I'm not going to go too in depth on why hitboxes and hit detection are the way they are. Besides, there are already many videos explaining why stuff like this happens. However, I will try to give you a quick explanation because these hitbox issues are very prevalent in Versus. When I say the game is lying to you, I mean this. Look at this survivor. The game is telling you that he is here, but in reality, the survivor is right here, or maybe even further ahead depending on the ping. So if I charged here, instead of directly at the survivor, I would have grabbed him. This applies to every special infected. You basically have to aim ahead of your target instead of directly at your target. Doesn't that sound ridiculous? It's like you have to play a guessing game, and if you guess wrong, you get punished. This video right here describes this issue perfectly, and it came out over 12 years ago. Quote, I like to play games where aiming is a skill, not a guessing game. End quote. I couldn't have said it better myself. I would go further on this topic, but this video is about Versus. Maybe one day we'll have a nonsense video on hitboxes and hit detection. That day is not today, however, so let's move on to my next problem with Versus, which is the scoring system.
What?
It's a fine system for a casual audience, but unfortunately, there are barely any casuals that play Versus anymore. The scoring system is too simple. There are barely any factors that go into it. Let me break it down. Survivors get points by traveling through a chapter and get bonus points for every survivor that survived. There is a 25-point penalty if a defibrillator was used. If both teams have the same score by the end of the chapter, the game will compare the damage done as infected. Whoever has more damage gets an additional 25 points. Whichever team is winning will play as the survivors first. That is basically the scoring system. Here is my problem. It's way too simple. That infected damage comparison is a joke. Even if it was a huge difference, it will always be 25 points no matter what.
You think this is funny?
I actually prefer the Left 4 Dead 1 score system. Sure, it may be complicated as hell, I mean really complicated, but at least that score system factored in more than just the distance traveled. There are almost no rewards or punishments in Versus. You can play like absolute dog water and make plenty of mistakes, but in the end, it doesn't matter as long as you make it. At least in Left 4 Dead 1, it factored your health and the items you were carrying. It rewarded you for playing well and punished you for playing poorly. This is how it should be, not this, where your quote-unquote reward is a measly 25 points.
You think this is funny?
That is why you have to target one survivor and try to kill him, which is easier said than done because playing as the survivor is a lot easier than the infected. The scoring system should have more. Maybe add a friendly fire penalty or add bonus points for not friendly firing at all. Add a penalty for taking too long to complete the chapter. Bring back the health bonus from Left 4 Dead 1. I just want there to be more ways to earn points and lose points. As it stands, this system is flawed in my opinion. If you end up on the losing team and you're behind by a lot of points, you are screwed. There is almost no way to make a comeback unless the enemy team really messes up. The game helps a little bit by having the losing team play as the infected first. That way they can know item locations and spawn points for the tank and witch ahead of time. I mean, that's something I guess, but not enough. It needs more. I know that adding these features can make the game even more toxic than it already is, but you can't avoid toxicity. It's always going to be there. You can try, like Overwatch 2 did, and look how that ended up. That game actually ended up being more toxic than Overwatch 1, and Overwatch 1 is dead now. God damn it, Blizzard. You may as well add more to the Versus experience and make it a more competitive game mode, because everyone treats it that way. There are no casuals that play Versus, not anymore. This is from my experience. I cannot find any casuals who play this game mode. It's all competitive people, and the game mode is designed for casuals, but no casuals actually play it. I'm done. I originally didn't want to talk about the Versus community because I wanted this video to strictly talk about the game itself and not the community around it. But I realized that the community is what makes or breaks a lot of people who play this game mode. Some don't play it because of the community, and I was one of those people. Nowadays, I can see that the community has improved over the years. Sure, you still have people who say the N-word, kick you for no good reason, and many more things that I probably shouldn't talk about because it'll make me go off on another tangent, and I don't want to do that again. Honestly, the Left 4 Dead 2 community is nowhere near as bad as other communities out there. Hell, I barely run into any hackers when I play Versus, so I'm just going to be grateful that this community is okay. And while I'm grateful that the community isn't as bad as it used to be, I still have to talk about how it affects Versus. I think the biggest problem with the community are the people who leave games prematurely. Most of the time they leave when, I don't know, they lose or lose a bunch of points. That is a huge problem with Versus. Leavers are just everywhere, and there are no punishments for leaving a game, which is fine because this is a casual game mode. My problem is that the game ends if everyone on the opposing team leaves. Why? It may sound stupid for the game to go on, but there is actually a mechanic that allows a player to switch teams. The game doesn't even give you a chance to do that, however, because the second the last player leaves, BAM! Wow, well, that's how most Versus games end. Well, that's that. It's just so disappointing, anticlimactic, and it happens so often. In fact, I had to prevent it from happening in almost every game I played for this video. When I was trying to get footage, I played 8 Versus games, and in 7 of those games, I had to switch teams to ensure the game didn't end. It is so rare to finish like a full game of Versus. So rare. Nobody ever switches sides. It's not like the game rewards you for doing so why would you? And what reward would the game give? There is no progression system in Left 4 Dead 2.
You're fucked, you know, I don't know.
We have to rely on the kind spirits of humanity and hope that the losing team has a sense of sportsmanship. Versus is not beginner friendly because of the community. You want to play Versus? You better watch this man's videos and practice against bots, because if you don't, you'll most likely be kicked in a heartbeat. The community isn't all bad, but the bad heavily outweighs the good, and because of that, less and less new players play Versus, which is a shame. But there is more to it than the community just being toxic. New players also have to face off against the gods of Left 4 Dead 2 because there is no matchmaking system. Not that I would want a matchmaking system, because this isn't some live service game with millions of people playing every day. No, this is a game with a small community that has grown comfortable with how Left 4 Dead 2 works. Adding a matchmaking system would probably be for the worse. When the community isn't so bad, Versus suddenly becomes very fun and entertaining. Despite the flaws I mentioned before, I cannot deny that Versus is amazing once you're in a balanced 4v4 game. Both teams having good players at a similar skill level is Versus in its prime, and it's absolutely amazing. But this scenario is extremely rare because there is no system to pair players against other players within their skill level. This means that a godlike player can be matched with a novice player. When this happens, the game is just completely unbalanced, and it only takes one player to be a god to carry the whole team, especially when they are playing as a survivor and they get their hands on that stupid sniper rifle. Some Versus games just feel completely hopeless because of how better the opposing team is, and this happens way too often because there are barely any rookies that play Versus in the first place. It's mostly godlike players. Yes, I call them gods because that is what they are. They bunny hop, they know where you spawn before you even know where you spawn, and they shoot you through walls. You do not stand a chance. I hate it. This makes Versus not so fun, and it's not entirely the game's fault, but the game could do things to make this better, because it is an issue. It's not an easy issue to fix, but I can't just not acknowledge it. You want to talk about overpowered weapons in Versus? Look no further than the sniper rifles. I mean, on paper they sound balanced, but in practice, snipers are supposed to be good at killing specials and are supposed to be weak against commons, but that's just not true. Snipers are great at killing commons. They're not the best at it, but they get the job done. Sniper bullets pierce through zombies and one-shot them from anywhere on the body, not to mention the fact that you can shoot this fast. If you're really having trouble killing commons, the survivors could just have one shotgun to deal with them, while the rest carry sniper rifles. The only downside snipers have are the long reload times. It is annoying, but realistically the special infected aren't tracking when you're reloading, so this weapon is just a monster. There is a reason why NasCoz always picks up a sniper rifle. You know how the game always encourages the survivors to stick together? Well, you don't even have to do that when you've got snipers. As long as they have line of sight of each other, the survivors can be as far away as they want. Sniper rifles in Versus make the game so one-sided in the survivors' favor. In fact, Versus is already kind of one-sided without snipers. Playing as the infected is a lot harder than the survivors because you need a whole lot more cooperation and coordination in order to win.
Yeah.
Wait, should I just wait them for the go-outs? Like, I don't know what to do. I'm just gonna do this.
What?
Don't ask.
Nah, you're going Wait, no, wait. We should have waited until they reach.
Playing as the survivors is much easier because of the amounts of second chances they get with first aid kits. In order to kill a survivor, you have to in-cap them 3 times, but with first aid kits, you need to in-cap them 5 times. Do you know how hard that is? Especially in some of these shorter levels? In some Left 4 Dead 2 tournaments, they actually remove tier 2 weapons and first aid kits entirely just to balance it out. I get this feeling of dread as the infected when I see a very good player pick up a sniper, because I know I'm just going to get bodied over and over and over again. To fix this issue, I think snipers should be nerfed. Maybe snipers having a slower firing speed will make every shot matter more. Reducing the amount of ammo you get with snipers might help too. I'm no game designer, but I feel like these weapons are too good in this type of game mode. Yes, it requires skill to pull off those headshots, but even if you miss the head, one single body shot does more than enough for you to be finished off by something else. Snipers aren't the only thing survivors have going for them. They also have a large number of exploits they can, you know, exploit. Not to say that the infected can't abuse exploits of their own, but the survivors have way more opportunities to exploit the game, such as skipping parts of a map, climbing a ladder faster, or healing yourself while reviving a teammate. Not every exploit is practical, and most of them got patched in the last stand update. But there are still plenty of things to be abused in Versus. Bunny hopping is the biggest offender. I don't have anything against you if you bunny hop. In fact, I do it sometimes as well. Bunny hopping only becomes a problem when you abuse it. Valve did not design the tank to have that much speed. This tank basically cheated. Bunny hopping is not as easy as it looks, but it's still an exploit at the end of the day, which will make the game mode even more frustrating for new players. As if the community wasn't enough. Now they have to deal with abnormal playstyles and people bouncing around like rabbits. What I'm about to say might sound a bit crazy and a bit of a hot take, but I prefer realism versus over normal versus. Playing as the survivors is too easy and requires less skill than the infected. It really shouldn't be that way. Playing as the survivors should be just as hard as the infected. I think adding realism to the mix will fix this issue, though the witch insta-kill and the common infected health bonus can be removed. Just keep the removal of survivor and item outlines. I think that change alone will downgrade the boomer's puke effect, but it will force the survivors to work together as a team more so than regular versus. The only time it feels like the infected have a chance is during a tank with a horde, or when the survivors have to go through a very difficult part of the map, like climbing a ladder or getting through a point of no return, like that infamous perish manhole that I always die to because my teammates are just too impatient to kill the special infected that spawned before we drop. But when these scenarios aren't at play, it's very hard to win as infected, which is why I prefer realism versus. Too bad nobody plays it, probably because the game is less fun when common infected take 10 million bullets to die. I find that frustrating too. Either way, I think realism versus is a more balanced game mode than regular versus. That is my hot take. I've been mostly negative during this review of this game mode, but there are some things that I really like, such as the tank. I still haven't really talked about him. As the infected, one person gets to play as the tank. If that player loses line of sight of the survivors and doesn't attack, a timer will appear and force you off the tank if you don't act. Once the timer goes through, the control will switch to another player. If the second player runs out of time as well, the tank will just turn into a bot and probably end up doing nothing. I gotta say, I do like the way the tank is handled in Versus. He is not some overpowered boss that can just wipe the floor with the survivors, unless he knows how to bunny hop, but let's just assume he doesn't. The tank is nothing when he is on his own. You still have to work with your teammates in order to survive. I really like that. He is slightly slower than the survivors, and he can die quickly if he isn't careful, despite having 6,000 health. The tank has the ability to throw rocks and punch vehicles and dumpsters to instantly down a survivor. You can even finish them off with the object as well. I wouldn't change anything about the tank. He is near perfect. I also like how the witch is handled. She is a boss that can be killed from any tier 2 weapon and shotgun.
Honeymoon's over.
The infector can scratch her, and that will cause her to aggro towards any survivor that goes near her, except the standing witch. Yeah, the standing witch is kinda useless because of her walk cycle and the fact that she cannot be scratched. She also does this screaming animation, which doesn't last long, but it lasts long enough for her to be crowned. The sitting witch is where it's at. If you try to crown her and you mess up, chances are she'll kill you. The last stand update actually buffed the witch's damage when she is clawing at you when down. This makes her even more threatening, but she is a major threat that can be disposed of so easily, and I really like the fact that the infected can influence the witch. So overall, Left 4 Dead 2 has amazing boss zombies, and they are even better in versus. You know, I almost forgot to mention versus survival, but to be honest, I don't really have much to say about this game mode. I don't see the potential in versus survival. I'm not sure why the last stand update added this game mode to the roster. It didn't really add value to the game, nor did it take away from the game. It just kind of exists. I managed to find one game of versus survival, and get this. Remember when I was talking about how unbalanced versus games can be, where the enemy team just outclasses yours? Well, in this versus survival game, I ended up on the team with a guy who left his mic open, and he looked like he wasn't even paying attention to the game. Meanwhile, the enemy team had this bunny hopping coach with a sniper rifle. Guess who won that game? Anyway, versus survival is a cool game mode, I guess. I just don't really care about it, and the only reason why I'm mentioning it now is because my brother reminded me that this game mode exists. Well guys, this is it. It's been 5 months. Versus is a very divisive game mode. Some people love it and some people hate it. Personally, I think Versus has great potential to be a fantastic competitive game mode, but it's a game mode designed for casuals in Left 4 Dead 2. The problem is that there are no casuals that play it. This leads to so many unbalanced games that it becomes a chore to play sometimes. Or I could just be wrong about this game mode and should appreciate what we got instead of what we could have gotten. When I look at other game modes similar to this, they either never see the light of day or are just straight up worse in every regard. Versus is not perfect and it can be improved upon in many ways, but I'm not going to take the Versus we got for granted because we could have gotten a game mode that has no soul, no effort, and no care put into it. Versus is flawed, but so am I.